Vrijdenkersfestival bij de Balie.
What a warm welcome. Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the Balie. My name is Eliza. I'm the program editor here, and I'm so delighted to welcome you all here tonight. Well, I've long admired our guest of honor, Roxane Gay. She's a writer, a thinker, a cultural critic whose voice has profoundly shaped feminist thought over the past decade. You might know the iconic line, "I would rather be a bad feminist than no feminist at all." And it's a statement she's not only written but lived for more than 10 years. And tonight, at a time when the feminist movement feels increasingly under pressure, we ask, how can we reclaim our space with our voices and with our bodies? So tonight we're going to have a conversation with 3 layers. First, we will talk about the current political landscape and the portable feminist reader. Secondly, we will talk about taking up space with Eliza Anyangwe. And then we will end the conversation by exploring claiming that space with our body with Tatjana Almuli. But before I sit down with her for tonight's conversation, it's my great pleasure to first invite Mayor Femke Halsema to the stage, who will open this annual festival, Freethinkers. A warm welcome, please.
Good evening, everybody. Do you hear me? Our distinguished guest. I hate all submissive people, all who believe everything and all who accept things merely on authority. These are the words of Wilhelmina Drucker, one of the greatest freethinkers in Amsterdam's history. She passed away exactly a century ago this year. The anti-fascist artist Gerrit van der Veen created a sculpture in her honor. And it's called De Vrije Vrouw, the free woman. One of Amsterdam's most beautiful statues. Drucker was impossible to categorize with labels. Too free-spirited for the left, too critical for the right. But one thing she certainly was, alongside a freethinker, she was a feminist, even before the word existed. Welcome to the Freethinkers Festival, and this is the 5th time, and we are very proud with our guest tonight. The city of Amsterdam sponsors the festival to mark, this year also, the upcoming 750th birthday of the city. And it feels right that this edition focuses especially on women and feminism. Because feminism and the freedom to express oneself belong together. Although not every feminist calls herself a free thinker. And not every self-proclaimed free thinker is free of sexism. But whoever stands for freedom for only half of society cannot truly be called a free thinker. And a true feminist must always be open-minded. Because what's the point of throwing off the yoke of sexism and misogyny only to submit ourselves to other kinds of unfreedom? History and the world today show that women's freedom is inseparable from the freedom of society as a whole. Just look around. The theocracy of Iran, Putin's ultranationalism, and the toxic pact between tech billionaires and Trumpists share something deeply troubling. Their agenda is anti-democratic, anti-rule of law, and anti-woman. That is no coincidence. Even here in the Netherlands, that same agenda grows louder. After 9/11, it became common to criticize the oppression of women and queer people, especially in parts of the Islamic world. And rightly so, because religious fanaticism continues to destroy lives. That's why Masih Alinejad, who fights for the freedom of Iranian women and lives in exile for it, has appeared on this stage twice now. And while last year this city used the Freethinkers Festival to remember the murder of Theo van Gogh, our filmmaker, very known in Amsterdam and abroad. Yet from the start, this so-called movement of Islam critics had something uneasy about it. Many, inspired by Spinoza and the Enlightenment, somehow ended up proclaiming the superiority of Western civilization. Not only does this neglect the problematic Western approach to women's rights throughout the centuries and until very recently, it also raises questions whether it is actually a fight for global freedom and equality or just about the demeaning of minorities in our own society. Nearly 25 years later, we face a resurgent far right with an agenda that no longer hides its intent. They still claim to defend women and queers, but mostly as props in a politics of hate. Their rallies now mix racist slogans with chants of sexual violence on the streets and online, as we just saw a week ago here in Amsterdam. Women Inc., a Dutch organization for women's emancipation, found that the election programs of far-right parties take even fewer measures to strengthen the position of women in our society than the ultra-conservative Christian party, the SGP. And the Dutch Bar Association has warned very recently that those same programs are filled with proposals that undermine the rule of law. Dear friends, it is past time, for feminists and for everyone who cherishes real freedom and democracy to stand together and speak out. Roxane Gay has done exactly this for years, and it's an honor to welcome you in Amsterdam. I've been a huge fan, as I've already said, for many, many years, for your critical mind and your free-spiritedness. Roxane Gay is one of the sharpest, bravest, and most deeply humane voices of our time. She teaches us that free thought only matters when it's joined with empathy. In a world full of lies and hollow frame, she is brutally honest. Against the arrogance of power, she sets the courage of vulnerability. And in an age of cynicism, she remains, despite everything, hopeful. With that spirit, she can help make our Freethinkers Festival what it is meant to be. A battle call for the free word, the free woman, and our free city. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, what a welcome, I would say.
I mean, maybe we can just do this all the time. That was such an amazing introduction. Plus, I always appreciate when politicians actually say what they think, which is so rare.
Very unusual, especially in the US.
Especially in the US. They just talk and they say nonsense. It's embarrassing, honestly, but I don't claim them.
And how is it for you that the mayor of Amsterdam calls you brutally honest? Is that a compliment?
Yes, I take it as a compliment.
Yeah.
Because so many people in this world, if they're not dishonest, they don't say anything. They're just silent, which is worse in many ways.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't call my kind of honesty brutal per se, but anytime you challenge power and the status quo, you know, no one is more of a victim than someone in power who feels threatened. And then all of a sudden, they are the most oppressed you have ever seen. Like, white men really really are the masters of this. And we see this a lot in the United States, where they really act like they're a victimized and oppressed class. And so my telling them that they're not, they will receive as brutality. And I offer it as honesty. So
the mayor just talked about Trump's first term. 10 years ago, when your book came out, Bad Feminist, it was Trump's first term. A lot has happened.
Before.
Way before.
Yeah.
But a lot has happened in the US since, right? Roe v. Wade, trans rights under pressure, gender inequality is under pressure. We live in an anti-democratic, anti-rule of law, and anti-woman world. That's what the mayor said. It's a big question, but that's maybe the question we all have here tonight. What can feminists do? What can we do, according to you, against that?
Well, I firmly believe that it's going to take far more than just feminists. If it was only the efforts of feminism, we would live in utopia already. Because feminists are already on the ground and doing this work. And it's really important for me to remind us of that, because we tend to believe that what is happening right now in the United States is a failure of feminism, but it's not. It's a failure of political imagination. And it's also a white response to a black president. Like, these men are still in their feelings, deep in their feelings about Obama, who hasn't been president for almost a decade.
Yeah.
And so hopefully they'll all go get therapy. But what we need to do as feminists is continue to do our work, to continue to demand that we receive the equity in society that we deserve, that we can live safely, that we can have bodily autonomy, and that we can make choices for ourselves that we feel empower us. And it's so sad. I mean, the bar is in hell right now, because that should be the bare minimum for anyone. And yet we're still struggling to achieve these very basic things for women. And so we have to continue to stay the course. I don't feel like we have to, a lot of times the question is, do we rebrand feminism to make it more appealing? And what's more appealing than a woman, honestly?
But it also sounds like you're saying that people are saying it's feminist. You just said feminists are blamed for what's not happening right now.
A lot of times, people say it's a failure of feminism, but
it's an easy way out. No?
It's a very easy way out. Let's take Roe v. Wade. Democrats in the United States had decades to codify Roe v. Wade into law federally, and they never did. They had the political power, and they never had the political will. And so it's infuriating for people to then say, what can feminism do? And it's no, what can people in power do? Because obviously feminism is not enough to address some of these long-standing issues. And so hopefully we can continue to do our work and influence people in power to codify our rights into law the same way that everyone else's rights are codified into law. But it's a big battle, and I hope that we all have the energy to fight it.
Yeah, it's interesting that we keep name dropping feminism, and in a lot of interviews, people ask you, "Can you please define feminism?" I'm not going to ask you because I know you don't want to. But you also say in those interviews that copying the worst behavior of men isn't just bad feminism; it's unacceptable. But how do these two ideas fit together then?
A lot of times people see feminism as simply achieving what men have. And I firmly believe we can just want more for ourselves. And so let's do better. Let's just have a little more ambition. And we have also seen women in power. And women in power don't necessarily behave any differently from men in power. So the solution isn't that we just have power, it's that we reframe our understanding of power. We relearn how to wield power.
We reclaim power in that way, or not really?
It's not about reclaiming, it's about how we use it, and how that we don't use it for only self-involved or self-interest. We don't only use it to make ourselves more wealthy, to give ourselves more power, that we try and think of the collective, that we spread the power around. I do think leadership is important. I don't believe we can sit in a circle and pass a stick and solve the world's problems. I don't think it would hurt, though. And so when I talk about power, what we're seeing right now in the United States and in other places around the world is hoarding. And power seems to only be hoarded by people who are really desperately ill-equipped to handle power.
Yeah, especially in Silicon Valley.
Especially. I mean, these idiots. Like, you take the most ill-adjusted, dweeby, no personality having man.
So Elon, are we talking
and you give him
about
$1 billion.
Elon Musk?
Oh God, I have way worse to say about him. Fuck him. I don't consider him a tech billionaire because he doesn't invent anything. He pays people who invented something and then pretends that he invented it. And so he's just a billionaire.
Yeah.
And also has no style. all that money, and he can't go and get a nice pair of Calvin Klein jeans? Like, bro, what? But you have all these maladjusted men who have weird ideas, and then they want to impose those worldviews on people, like the bald one, Andreessen, who wants to talk about these weird ideas about domination, and then Peter Thiel, who wants to talk about the Antichrist.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, are you taking your medication? Wait, what is wrong with these men? And because they've earned a lot of money, people equate that with intelligence, but there's no correlation between wealth and intelligence, obviously. It's just none.
Okay, we've talked about the men we despise, but if we shift it to the women we love, who would be a role model for you?
Oh, my mom, for sure. I know that sounds cheesy, but she was amazing and always taught me to stand up for myself, to do what is right, to help others. She taught me that the best investment I'll ever make in myself is reading and education, and that's the one thing no one will ever be able to take away from me in this world. And I also believe that now myself. And so she would never call herself a feminist, and every time I would call her a feminist, she would be like, "Oh, Roxane, I am not a feminist. No." And I would just be like, literally, in the book, the dictionary, there you are, your picture right there, feminist. But sometimes people get stuck on the label instead of the behaviors, the actions that people comport themselves with. And she was very feminist. And for me, she was the role model, the blueprint, the beginning, the end. And so I admire her.
Is she someone she recently passed away. That's why we had to cancel the last event.
Yes.
But is this also someone who you always have in mind when you're writing about feminism then?
She definitely informs a lot of my work because she's also a pragmatist and honest, brutally honest. Like, you want to talk about a brutally honest person.
What's an example
Ask
of her
Nicole
being
Gay.
brutally honest?
Like, in the last year of her life, she was mostly well, but she had been sick for many years with cancer, but she was doing very well. And she would still say, "Am I going to read your last book before I die?"
And that's the portable feminist?
I was like, girl, no. I wish. This was the book I put out to make her stop.
This is so many pages.
No, the book she was talking about is a book that hopefully will come out next year called How to Be Heard. It's a book of writing advice and how to use your voice. And she would always tell me, like, every single day, "Oh, Roxane, it's been 5 years since you last wrote a book." And I'm like, damn, are we counting? No pressure? So she was always there informing me, but also, when you are online, you tend to forget about people who have different sensibilities. And so my parents, among many other people, have been really great barometers for what matters. And is this a real problem to be concerned with, or is this a concern of like 20 people who need to log off? And so I also appreciate that sort of perspective.
And how can you... Do you still have that voice with her when you're thinking about, okay, they need to log off and maybe delete their accounts?
Always. I mean, I left Twitter a couple years ago because, obviously, and...
But you were named the queen of clapback on Twitter.
I was, but Twitter became something... When Elon Musk bought Twitter, I knew it was the beginning of the end, and I knew it was time to leave because he doesn't have friends. And so he wanted to buy a social media site to try and get friends. And even then he couldn't. So he was like, well, let me just make it a Nazi palooza. And then I'll be with all my besties.
And I'll join politics.
Yes.
At the same time.
At the same time, even though I have no qualifications and I'm not very bright. And so he did. And I don't need to be in his little unchlorinated pool. I'm fine not participating. And ever since then, I've tried to have a very different relationship with social media. I'm married to someone who's like online, but not with a capital O. She doesn't really do her own social media. She doesn't go online. She doesn't know anything but like dog videos.
Oh, wow.
It's amazing. I'm like, how do you exist? But having that perspective, and oftentimes she would just say, when I would come like to talk to her after some weird Twitter encounter, she would just say, why are you talking to Fred 227? And after 20 times of her asking me that, I realized she's right. Let me stop talking to Fred.
The bubble, no?
The bubble. And the bubble is over-exaggerated. A lot of times people are like, oh, you're in a silo. Yes, and it's good here. Women are people here, and I believe in equality here. Come on over, it's good. And so I don't worry about the bubble so much anymore, but I do worry about over-amplifying issues that aren't actually important because you are in an information ecosystem that's narrow.
What would be an example of such an issue?
Oh, nothing is coming to mind. That's a good question. It's generally more personal than political.
Okay.
Like, oh, everyone hates my work because Fred 227 pointed out something he didn't like in my work, more than like these bigger issues. But sometimes I will say the online issues seem like they're just online, but they matter. For example, there's a political candidate in the US right now who's running for Senate in the state of Maine, and he has a Nazi tattoo on his chest. And a lot of white men are like, and he's running as a Democrat.
Oh, okay.
And a lot of progressive white men are like, we all make mistakes, and you know, like he got it 20 years ago as a Marine. And I'm like, that's not helping at all.
Also, has he not heard about laser removal?
Correct. He's had 20 years. In fact, did you guys know there's a tattoo removal boutique somewhere here in Amsterdam?
Yeah, there is.
I drove by it and I was like, how dare they? But, you know, that people treat like a tempest in a teapot, but I think it's an important test case for, yes, we need a big tent to make progress in the United States, but we don't have to bring Nazis into the tent. Like, that's, no.
Tent's too small.
They are not allowed in the tent. And he has had 20 years to take that tattoo off. And he also has a bunch of weird social media posts, but he wasn't like 15 when he made them. He was like 25.
Ooh.
And they're like, women who go in the military should be sexually assaulted. Like, and so that we're so desperate now that we're like, yeah, maybe he is the best person in the entire state of Maine to be in the Senate.
Yeah. Okay.
And in the U.S., only 2 senators from each state, so it's much more important than the...
Slim pickings, then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so slim. And it's much more important than the House of Representatives, which has like 538 members. And so it does matter more. He does have to, you know, be able to pass the very low bar of don't be a Nazi.
You'd hope so. So you just said the personal... sometimes it's personal and not political. I think this is personal and political. You just brought out the Portable Feminist Reader. It came out in March. And I was curious, like you enlighten voices that maybe were forgotten or aren't highlighted in other textbooks. Why did you decide to write this now?
Well, I will say it's a project that had been long gestating. It took about 5 or 6 years to work on, and Penguin approached me and asked if I wanted to edit the next installation. And even though anthologies can be a lot of work because there's a lot of securing of permissions and trying to figure out what should go into this book, I still said yes. I was really excited by the opportunity because it's rare that women of color and Black women in particular get to be the arbiters of what can be considered feminist thought.
Yeah.
And so I was very honored. And I spent about 2 or 3 years actually reading all of the feminist literature and theory I could get my hands on. And then I started to make decisions like about what should I include and what should I not. And part of it was financial because you have to pay permissions fees. And the one thing I did know was that I wanted to include as much contemporary work as possible.
Yeah.
Because these readers often include primarily historical texts. And people are like, oh, it's because it's the foundation. And it's like, no, because they're free. They're part of the public domain. So it was really great to really focus on contemporary feminist thought and to be a little more expansive in what we might consider feminist writing. So
Is it mostly women of color or not?
No, it's very diverse. It's women and like 1.5 men.
The newest American show.
Yes. Yes, so it is a range of people. There are women of color. There are women with disabilities. There are queer women, trans women. It's just interesting feminist thought, which was the primary consideration. And that was my guiding principle.
But was it also maybe to make a point? Well, I don't know if you feel that way as well, but sometimes it feels that when we listen to feminists, they pretend that there isn't a whole history that exists already.
Yes. Well, that's why I included some of the historic works, because if I had my druthers, when I was first thinking about the project, I was like, oh yeah, it's going to be all contemporary. But all of the work that we do today is built upon a foundation.
Yeah.
It's just the foundation that's contested, and that foundation has oftentimes been very narrow and has represented only one kind of feminist thinker, white, middle class, straight women.
Yeah.
And nothing wrong with that. But there are many other women who have contributed lots of interesting ideas to the canon. And so I did try to create space for those, both in the past and the present. But in the past, some of those texts are actually hard, if not impossible, to find because that scholarship was not preserved.
So it's also so that we're sort of able to stand on their shoulders.
Yes, we are always standing on someone else's shoulders when we're doing this kind of work. And I try to acknowledge that in everything I do. And then also to a point, like how long are you gonna, how much do we need to honor the foundation when the foundation is always gonna be there, but what matters now is what we're building upon it. Yeah. And so I do try to maintain the right balance of honoring the fact that we are working from a very solid foundation, but that what's happening now is very dynamic, very exciting, and far more inclusive than it has ever been. And there's still a lot of work to do. Yeah. So this is not an end point.
Okay. Before we move on to the next part, we're talking about claiming space with our bodies, with our voices. And in a lot of interviews or podcasts, you say, I don't really like doing interviews, which I found quite interesting, because is that maybe a way of rebellion for you? Or why do you keep doing it then if you don't like it that much?
Because I have a mortgage. Just like, it's so interesting because a lot of times people will ask me this question, it's like, why are you here at this event?
Because I asked you, of course.
Because I was paid, not here, but here I'm here because I've never been to Amsterdam, and the lineup looked incredible, and I get to share the stage with Eliza and Tatjana. So, yes. But in general, it's not that deep. But with interviews, I feel like a lot of times I'm asked not very smart questions and or very insulting questions, and it's just like, what is my time worth? What is my peace of mind worth? Yeah. And my peace of mind is absolutely worth not subjecting myself to an interviewer who didn't read the book, isn't familiar with who I am, and is just doing this interview because it was assigned. And that no problem. Like, we all have our burdens, but I don't have to participate in that particular burden.
No.
And also, how many interviews with me does one need? There's enough out there.
Well,
Google
I think if you ask this audience...
Well, that's true.
They'd say many. Well, thank you so much. We're going to go to the next part. And I would really like to ask Eliza and Anyangwe to join us. I really admire her work. That's why I asked her. She's going to read something for us. But before she does, I'm going to introduce her properly, of course. But go ahead. You can walk to the stage. She's editor-in-chief of the Fuller Project, a non-profit global newsroom focused on accountability journalism through a gender lens. Previously, she was managing editor of CNN's multi-award-winning gender inequality reporting team, As Equals, and co-founder of the Gender Beat, a collaborative project to promote nuanced, impactful gender journalism and build a supportive community for those who produce it. I'm so happy you're here.
I'm so embarrassed that that's a longer bio than anyone that we have for Roxane, our superstar. But who probably doesn't need a bio, right? The interviews are all out there. No one knows me, so I must give them my...
Born in Nebraska.
Roxane was born in Nebraska. Eliza, you're going to read something for us?
I will, and that something suggests that it's like writing I've been crafting. No, I am here in front of Roxane Gay to read Roxane Gay. So... These are one of those moments where I'm just like, I'm so grateful for like African parents, because that pressure to perform comes through in moments like this. I'm hearing my mom go, don't let me down. So all the ancestry. Okay, I've been asked to pick a story or something of Roxane Gay's work that resonated with me. And this is something, as my partner somewhere in the crowd will have heard, I spent much of this year preoccupied with this question. And I wanted to pick something that like you may not have already read or not already known. And so I selected a story that I listened to in Albania, of all places, called Requiem for a Glass Heart. And can I, just a show of hands, who has heard or read Requiem for a Glass Heart? I can't tell if she's raising her hand or covering her eyes from the light.
Oh, there's a raised hand.
Okay, so no one, so good. Even more pressure to not fuck it up. Okay. The stone thrower lives in a glass house with his glass family. He is a flesh and blood man going about the business of living with his glass wife and glass child, their glass furniture and glass lives. The stone thrower, a good yet flawed man given to overindulgence, met his wife on a beach. After a lightning storm on a night when the sky refused to surrender to darkness, and yet there were stars up above. He saw the small fissure her body made in the sand first, moved closer, moved carefully. Then he saw her body bathed in moonlight, her eyes shining brightly. He instantly fell in love because he could not believe what lay before him. Her beauty was so mystifying and entrancing that it pierced through his skin and into his blood and wove itself tightly around his heart. He did not think about what it would mean to love a glass woman. He fell to his knees. He took her hand in his, turned the palm over. He gently placed his lips against the tender spot between her thumb and her forefinger. He closed his eyes and inhaled deeply. He prayed that when he opened his eyes, she would still be there. When he did, she was. The stone thrower's wife instantly fell in love because the stone thrower was everything she was not. He was the first man who did not see through her. He helped her to her feet, and then they walked for hours and miles more. He listened and enjoyed her husky voice as she told him all of her hopes, her dreams, her fears. She tried to keep some secrets for herself, but she couldn't. His propensity for indulgence was infectious. She laid herself bare and did not think about what it would mean to love a man of flesh. The stone thrower and his wife courted for 7 months and married on the 7th day of that 7th month. She wore a silver gown and diamonds in her glass hair. The stone thrower stood next to her in front of his family and his friends and their families. They vowed to love, to honor, to protect, to obey, although he did not yet know how he would keep his word. When the stone thrower and his glass wife make love, she is always on top. Her cool glass hands pressed against his chest. She lies down on top of him, leg to leg, breast to breast, face to face. He kisses her long, slender neck, the hollow spaces above her clavicles. He slides his hand along the length of her glass hair, then holds her face, tracing her lips with his thumbs. The stone thrower's wife warms to his touch, just slightly, and though he cannot see it, he can feel her body respond. He enjoys the pressure of her glass thighs, trembling against his, and the way she breathes into his mouth, shallow and fast. When the stone thrower's wife comes, her body fogs in a random pattern outward from her heart. As she catches her breast? I'm writing the X version for you. As she catches her breath, she can often hear her heart threatening to implode with the high-pitched lamentation of glass succumbing to pressure. When she is certain her heart won't break, she rolls onto her side and the stone thrower lovingly traces lines in the condensation he has left behind. Sometimes, after they make love, the stone thrower will light a candle, sit against the headboard holding his wife in his arms, her glass spine arched against his thick, matted chest. He will look down at his seed slowly sliding out of her. He asks her to lay herself bare further, to share secrets he does not yet know. He has become accustomed to asking too much, now yearns to know too much. She often acquiesces, speaking softly, exposing herself in complicated ways. The stone thrower smiles, his wife does not. Every morning, the stone thrower sits across from his glass wife at their glass table, and he watches as orange juice, okay, this is a hard word for me, sluices? Oh, thank God. Sluices down her glass throat into her glass stomach. She rarely bothers with clothes when the drapes are closed, feels she has nothing to hide. It is a remarkable thing, the stone thrower often thinks. Being able to see such intimacies, being able to see the separation of her whole into parts. She'll look at him, then into the distance, her cheeks growing warm, while she remembers the night before. As they discuss the coming day, the stone thrower's wife will reach across the table and take his hand in hers. She'll trace the calluses, the fingers that are bent but not broken. He'll squeeze back gently, ever careful not to break her. After the stone thrower and his glass wife share breakfast, he takes his glass child to school, holding the boy's cool, translucent hand in his. He listens carefully as the boy tells him about his hopes, his dreams, his fears. With every word he speaks, the stone thrower feels his heart expanding, nearly breaking the cage of bone protecting it. After he kisses the boy on the forehead, sending him on his way, the stone thrower will sometimes stand just outside the child's classroom, peering in, holding his breath, hoping that the other children will be gentle and kind, however fragile such hope may be. During the day, the stone thrower's glass wife busies herself with the work of living in a glass house. Room by room, she uses soft cloths to wipe clean every surface because her husband cannot help the things he leaves behind. As she wipes away the fingerprints and skin and stray hairs, she smiles to herself and hums the waltz to which she and her stone thrower danced at their wedding. Sometimes her neighbors will stop in front of the glass house and stare as they catch glimpses of her body's glass contours beneath the clothes she wears more for their benefit than hers. They will whisper to each other, shake their heads. They will condemn that which they cannot understand. What the stone thrower's wife loves most is when she strips out of her clothes and disappears into the world unseen. It is a sacred time. Those hours between when her work is done and her child and husband return home. She steals these moments for herself because her life is so transparent that she craves having something private, something precious. She crafts from these moments secrets for herself that she has not shared and will not share with her husband, who sees too much and loves too carefully. Most days, the stone thrower's wife goes to the nearby park with wide open spaces that cannot contain her. She stretches her long limbs and stares into the sky. She marvels at the clear blue brightness above. She closes her eyes and says a small prayer. Then she runs. She runs because she is intoxicated by the sensation of wind against her bare glass skin. She enjoys the abandon of pushing her glass body and testing its limits and feeling the rough pavement and the cold, slick grass beneath her bare glass feet. Her husband loves her, but he worries. He wearies. He thinks her delicate. He fears that the slightest thing will splinter her or return her to the grains of sand from which she rose. The stone thrower prefers to keep his wife trapped inside the safety of their glass house, where the dangers are not seen, but known. She knows that the glass walls of their home cannot protect her. She runs.
Thank you so much, Eliza.
I survived.
It was great.
You did amazing.
Oh, thank you.
I want to start with you. What drew you to this text?
I wouldn't claim to have read all of Roxane's work. Can I call you by your first name?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Okay.
I mean, as opposed to what?
Mama Roxy. Anyway,
It's so funny because my nieces call me Auntie Rox.
Auntie Rox. Okay. So Roxane, I'm obviously, I started with Hunger, and I'm familiar with her writings, her essays, even her Twitter, X, now Blue Sky threads. If you are not in the know, catch up. Like her threads are amazing. But I wanted something that was less familiar to me. I even was open to something that was not nonfiction. And so I, on an app that we shall not name, a streaming app that will not be named, I was just checking for her name and listened to podcast interviews and then found the story and was so touched by the humanity in it. Like every character, I didn't read the whole story for you. I really encourage you to read or listen to it. Every character is thought through with such care, even though it is clearly fantastical. And there is a very obvious metaphor there, right? People who live, based on the adage, people who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. But then the story opens up in ways that we did not expect. And as a feminist and as a feminist writer and author, and I'm claiming it now, as a journalist, I was also really struck by the ways that throughout feminist history, I'm from Cameroon. By the time I was 18, I'd lived in 10 countries on 3 continents. I'm so familiar with the way women move and other people who are minoritized, opening up all of themselves to acquire some modicum of safety. And there was some, beneath the surface of just really beautiful writing, there was this point about the glass woman in her glass house and how everything is transparent to everyone and how there are those who don't understand it and despise it and those who don't understand it but love it and try to protect it, which she doesn't want either. And I think about how minoritized people just also want to be fully seen, to break, to run, to try, to all the things that the glass woman does on her own. And I was thinking about that as someone who moves through the West as, a Black African woman with a certain body and, yeah.
Thank you. Do you want to respond? Or?
You got it all. No, but when I wrote this story probably 15, 16 years ago. And I wrote it after watching the movie Sweet Home Alabama with Reese Witherspoon. And at the beginning of the movie, some lightning strikes sand and glass is made. And I thought, well, what if a woman of glass was made when lightning hit sand? And from there, I went to town. But it really was also about the ways in which women are expected to bear themselves and to be caretakers and to give and to give and to give until there's nothing left. And I wanted to tell a sort of fairy tale-like story about that has some of the darkness of original fairy tales. And so I'm really glad that you connected with the work in that way, because that was what I wanted people to connect with, while also just enjoying what was hopefully a good story. But as you read it, I was like, yeah, I put my foot in that. That was good.
So I came across a little, a post on, as we were preparing for today, on some site that I'd never heard, where Roxane Gay is offering her story and asking, crowdsourcing help. Was that you? Like, it says, I wrote this thing and I don't know how to finish it. Did you see that as well?
And please add the rest of the story.
Yeah, like asking people to
Not me. Oh. Wow, I have a doppelganger.
Yeah, the doppelganger is out here trying to get writing tips.
As my niece would call it, a dupe. I have a dupe or an op. I mean, they just speak a different language, but I did not know that. There is a Roxane Gay out there asking for someone to finish the story. The day I ask for someone to tell me how to finish a story, I'm cooked.
What I was curious about when I read it as well is that the woman remains nameless the entire time. Was that on purpose? Because is it deeper?
It's not deeper, but it is, in that, yes, it was a deliberate choice. Yeah. I just didn't know what names would add to the story. It just didn't feel like it would contribute. And almost every decision I ever make when I'm writing is this going to add or contribute in some useful way? Or would it detract, or would it have no effect at all? And if it is that or it would detract, then I don't include it. And so I just kept thinking, like, what is her name? I did wonder about it and think through it. And then I just thought it doesn't actually matter what her name is because she could be anyone. Mm-hmm. And she is clearly a specific character, but it is also metaphorically that she could be almost any woman.
But she's clearly someone's wife. That was important.
Yes, and that label was also key because a lot of times, historically, women have been called like Mrs. Smith or Dr. and Mrs. Smith, and people assume that it's the wife. Like, you take your husband's name, no shame, and you kind of lose a piece of yourself. You become someone's mother and you lose a piece of yourself, and you start to be identified primarily in regards to, you become labeled primarily with your relationships to other people instead of who you are. And so I really wanted to, I think a little heavy-handedly, drive home that she was the stone thrower's wife. Yeah. And I wanted to have the husband be someone who's a decent man, but flawed. Yeah. And who would be a physical contrast to her.
Yeah, and someone you can sort of empathize with, but not really.
Well, no, I wanted people to empathize with him because his concerns about being married to his wife were real. And at the same time, he does in the story make a mistake. And I wanted to write it such that you don't immediately write him off because she doesn't write him off, but you do harbor a reasonable amount of frustration toward him, but still see him as a person and as human instead of a caricature, because he's not meant to be a caricature.
And how do you both relate to that glass woman?
How do I relate? I recognize this. I find that I've been leading newsrooms for at least a decade now, and there's a line between what I think should be how, like, if you embody the values, whatever feminism means to me, how I run teams, how I, think about how I show up at work. And yet I still find that I also feel like I over-explain. I try and make myself, I'm very bad with ambiguity. And I think that's in part because I moved around so much and was always the other everywhere. And so you know that you have work to do for people to understand you, right? You are the one who is newest here. And yet that kind of I'll lay my soul bare, also then leaves you feeling very vulnerable. So I very much recognized that about her. I also recognized not just in her, but that, in the fact that her husband's body is also something that people stare at, right? And so there is something about that and our bodies and, the ways in which we relate to each other, not just by what we say, but what we see and where we categorize people. But I was really struck by the fact that he doesn't mind. And I think that's because of the relative power that he has. He doesn't have to care that people are stopping to stare at his body. He is used to it, and he continues doing what he does and moves through society. And yet it comes at a much greater cost.
And is he used to it because he's a man? Is that what you're saying, or?
I think he's used to it because he is a man, right? Because it doesn't mean that, male bodies or people who, who society sees it as male are not under any kind of body pressure. But we know that that has been predominantly reserved for people who identify as women. We know that if you are a trans woman, part of the reason that you are subjected to greater violence is because of the body you're in, right? And the ways in which people not just shake their heads because they don't recognize it and don't feel safe about it, but enact violence on you because of the body you are in. Because after all, it's not so much our views or our politics, it's much of our sense of how we relate to each other is just based on the things we see, the bodies we are in. And I think for all the people in that story, the stone thrower, his wife, and their son, all of them are grappling with moving through the world in a body that is responded to in different ways. And the son story has some hope in it because children respond differently, but the adults are on a specific path.
How do you relate to that and to the woman?
As I was writing the story and in the years since, I've thought a lot about how you can be invisible in public, but also highly visible. And that was a thing that I always have related to, because when you live in a fat body or a black body or a woman's body, you're hyper visible. People see you, they comment, they do whatever they're gonna do. But at the same time, they also treat you as invisible. They'll like walk right through you. People will walk down the street and just like shove themselves into you for no reason, because they don't see you, because they don't care about you, etc.
They don't want to see you.
They don't. And, you know, live your life, but it's rude. And so I really could relate to that with this woman, where she's invisible in many ways, but also she's not, because you can see the contours of her glass body. And that, you know, the fragility of that tension was very interesting to me, and is definitely something I related to.
Yeah. So are you also saying that the space for women is getting much smaller, or
No.
not?
No, not. I think women deal with all kinds of constraints by living in a body and being in public. And we're not constrained as we once were. Mm-hmm. Though in this current moment of political retrenchment, who knows what's going to happen. But on the whole, with many exceptions around the world, women have the most movement and freedom we've ever had. Mm-hmm. And it's so important to acknowledge those progress when it happens, because otherwise it's really hard to stay motivated in the fight, and to encourage people to join, because they'll say, oh, well, if nothing changes, why bother? But things actually do change.
Yeah, there's something that when people think about progress, I think in the West especially, right, our concept of time is just so linear. So like we're either moving forward or we're not, and it's like panic. And that we're moving forward and backwards at the same time. And that actually in any given moment, we have both more power and in some ways less than we did. And I think that being comfortable with that nuance is important.
In what way is that then?
So for example, in Europe, the rise of, because our mayor talked about, the mayor of the city of Amsterdam, talked about a little bit about what's happening here, but the main examples were from elsewhere, right? And we see the march of the far right across Europe. And we, like a couple of years ago, there was a survey on what people's views were of gender equality, and young men, even in Germany, right, like, which, I stress that because it's not, even amongst European, it's like the largest economy, so you would expect on the markers of progress, right, German guys will get it. And they've had, Angela, our girl Ange. But the point is that even in Germany, young men were thinking that gender equality has gone too far. Yeah. Like South Korea, they voted in a leader on the back of an anti-feminism. Like, so, this idea that we're moving forward and backwards at the same time is true, right? A couple of years ago in the city, I attended an abortion march, which, given the way my lovely Dutch friends like to see themselves, this kind of Dutch exceptionalism. The problem is elsewhere, and we will march in solidarity. There was somebody who got on the stage and said, while we have certain rights around abortion here, and sort of the date for when a pregnancy can be terminated in the Netherlands is one of the latest in Europe, still, it is not codified into law. And so things can change because progress is not linear. And there are so many fights at home while we're sort of wringing our hands about what's happening in the US. We are looking to Germany and Hungary and Russia and like the UK, where 50,000 people marched under a banner of fascism, where or anti-immigration and fascist rhetoric, where they were basically saying, we are doing this not because we are anti-immigrant or xenophobic. We're doing this to protect our women and girls. And the stickiness of that narrative is something that we should be very concerned about, because which politician doesn't want to be seen to be protecting women and girls? And so then we continue to move the overture, like the window, further and further to the right.
Yeah. What's always interesting is the way that women and girls are used as political fodder.
Completely.
Where they're used as the explanation, the excuse, and very few women and girls ever stand up and say, oh no, not in my name.
That's not me.
Don't do that for me. Like, I'm fine. It's interesting. And I think that's also why we see a lot of the voting statistics that we see in the United States around white women voting for Republicans who they know are fascist, who they know are authoritarian. It's because adjacency to power is oftentimes more important to people than freedom.
In everyone's liberation.
Because maybe they'll be nice and carry me under their umbrella of power.
And they'll spare me then.
Yes, maybe they'll spare me, which they will not. You are actually going to be on the front lines of receiving their violence.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that women and girls are used as the excuse and the justification for some pretty bad behaviors. And also, I think most women in this context would agree that the dangers they face aren't coming from immigrants.
Absolutely.
They're coming from their fathers, sons, brothers, and husbands.
Absolutely.
So, you know, like ask a pregnant woman who wants to leave that relationship what her mortality rate is. It's not good. So these conversations, like you said, it's that stickiness, that nuance. People are very uncomfortable with nuance. And it means that we have to force them into that place of discomfort to really have useful conversations, to really create change. And that's really difficult.
But how can we force them then?
I don't know. I mean, there are ways we can. What would you say, Eliza?
I would say we need to do more of this type of stuff, right? Like, so take it offline. Like the idea, I mean, I started working in journalism in 2008. And so like the idea of the kind of promise of the open internet and that we would all meet in what, you know, our first sort of like public square, and we would all have an equal say and voice. That obviously didn't pan out because, you know, profit motive. So I would say, like, we need to be getting out of digital spaces more and into physical spaces because society is changing quickly. And there's no point, you know, I love Roxane's pragmatism because there is no point vilifying people who are struggling to keep pace with change, right? Like, oftentimes, the thing that changes first and fastest is our language, right? You can change that tomorrow, but our systems and the ways in which we relate to each other, those things take longer to change. And so you have to bring people with you. And I don't think that like calling each other names online will do that. I think actually hosting events where you're like, drop your phone off at the door and we're going to have, or like citizen assemblies, you know, this idea that we will all come and decide together what matters to us. Okay, what do we want to do in this situation, right? That is how the Republic of Ireland, which is a very Catholic country, managed to decriminalize abortion because they took it out of the political sphere and created citizen assemblies where it's kind of like a jury. You know, people across society get together and they look at the facts. And turns out people are less polarized than their media or their politicians would like them to believe. And so having offline nuanced conversations, I think, are very critical.
Yeah, I would agree. And I would also add that we tend to forget that discomfort isn't going to kill us.
Yes.
And so one of the key things that I talk about when I do events like this and when I teach with my students and, you know, in any relevant context is that, yeah, you're uncomfortable.
That's okay.
Let's move on. Like, it's okay.
Yeah.
We somehow have gotten to a point where some people believe that they are promised comfort, that they don't have to confront themselves and their own biases, that they don't have to challenge themselves or be challenged. And that is not the case at all. And I include myself in this. There are many things that make me uncomfortable. And I have to force myself to do it. And then I'm always reminding myself, this is actually not going to kill you. It's not even going to harm you. It's just uncomfortable.
What would be an example of that?
I'm really bad at examples.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So
keep asking.
I'm like, I don't know. Well, I'm afraid of public speaking for one. And yet here I am.
Yeah.
I do it. But, you know, I think a key example is I live in, I teach at a predominantly white institution. I always have, and that's fine. I teach at Rutgers. It's great. I love my job. But when you work with students, not necessarily at Rutgers, but at previous institutions I've taught in predominantly rural areas as well. And many of the students are not only first generation college students, but they're first generation rural students who come from very conservative backgrounds. And I've had to learn over the years how to create space for these kids to come to the classroom and be who they are, and also be myself.
Yeah.
And that can be so uncomfortable where I like, oh, don't temper yourself, don't make yourself smaller, don't hide who you are and what you believe within a relevant context of the classroom.
Yeah.
And also don't try to, make them believe what you believe. And I always tell them, because the deeper I get into my career, the more my students know who I am. And apparently Google works still. And so I always tell them, I'm actually not here to tell you what to think. I'm here to tell you how to think, how to decide for yourself what you think, and then how to write about it well. And once I tell my students that, you can see for the ones of them that are more conservative, that the sort of deflation of tension. And so allowing myself to just recognize, like, this is not my moment for indoctrination. It's more, my moment for education in the truest sense of the word. There's a very uncomfortable tension there. And then also just like trying to have political conversations with people I am not wholly aligned with. Those can be very uncomfortable. And one of my key focuses for the rest of the year and moving into next year is just recognizing, and I certainly didn't invent this idea, I actually read it. I was recently reminded of it because I read it in an essay from Eula Biss about how coalitions don't mean that we all agree or that we even have the same issues that we're concerned with, but we are cause connected. And like right now, the cause is democracy. So like we're gonna have to be a little more understanding and accepting of different kinds of people, not Nazis. And that's uncomfortable sometimes because sometimes, a lot of the issues we see in the United States, especially with progressives, what we're seeing right now is people who are like, we need to jettison trans rights, which absolutely the fuck not. And finding ways to talk about that with people who you are 100% politically aligned with otherwise is difficult, because I just want to smack them and just ask you, like, should we leave you at the rest area as well? Like, what are we doing here? And so it's just really figuring out how to navigate these conversations as well as possible. And again, recognizing that it's going to be uncomfortable and there may not be a neat resolution. And also, we're not always going to get what we want. We might get 80% of what we want or 65% of what we want, and that's still progress. Like you said, like there's always going to be moving forward, moving back, and sometimes those shifts are happening simultaneously.
No, I think that's really astute, obviously, Roxane Gay. But I was just thinking last week, at the end of last week, I sent an email where I said to someone, look, I'm glad that we can share values, but it's far more important to me that we share a mission than we believe exactly the same thing, right? Because the other thing moving around a lot has taught me is that, when you get the right group of, our kind together, people still find ways to create hierarchies and power. Like, people are going to be peopling everywhere, right? Like, you look at Sierra Leone or Liberia, where did Marcus Garvey go? Like, you think, oh, they took themselves out of the US because it was understandably dreadful to be a person, a black person in America there, and then took themselves to West Africa and created an uneven society there that put the people who had connections to the US at the top of that society. And so I'm far more fervently committed to wanting to be in a society where difference is understood not as I'm different and you're all the same, but actually all of us are different. And difference is fundamentally uncomfortable because we have to learn each other, understand each other, figure out how we navigate societies together. And I think, like Roxane said, we have come to, I'm often at feminist conferences and people have come to understand safe space to mean no disagreement, right? And unless we all think the same or we silence on behalf of someone.
But we should. Do you agree that we should think the same about rights, right?
I think we should understand the difference between, if someone has a boot on their neck, that person is not in the position to be, I'm not expecting that person to ask nicely and negotiate for the boot to be taken off their neck, right? And it is my job as someone who cares about that person to maintain the perspective that they're not able to have in that moment, right?
And that's actually the cornerstone of a lot of the friction right now in the Democratic Party, progressives, liberals, whatever. There's a range of groups that are in general politically aligned. But a lot of people, and I've been writing about this and thinking about this a lot lately, it comes down to civility. And a lot of people are suggesting like we should be civil and talk about politics and like, let's be civil. Charlie Kirk was civil. And I was like, did you listen to what Charlie Kirk said? And what he actually did with his life? That's uncivil, first of all. But like you said, when the pressure is on, when you are in the line of fire, when you are directly dealing with oppression, the idea that you're supposed to daintily work your way out of it is appalling. And we see this on a global scale. We see it whenever people dare to talk about Palestine, and people are like, oh, but they should just lay down their arms against an all-encompassing force that has killed 50,000 people? Like, really? What's the safe space there? And it's so challenging because, yes, there's nuance, and yes, there's a lot more to the conversation than that. But right now you are looking at people even now that have the entire world's foot on their neck, and people are trying to police how they bear that. And so it happens at that scale and at a much smaller scale as well. And it's really challenging to figure out how we tell people we can't expect oppressed people to sort of daintily trot out of oppression. First of all, that's not how the end of oppression works. It's generally challenging and difficult and sometimes messy.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I think this is the right time. I mean, I could listen to you for hours, but I think this is the right time to move on to the next part, because we've been talking about reclaiming space, and I've invited Tatjana Almuli, a writer, photographer, and presenter, and the author of several beautiful and courageous books, here tonight. And I think she was a very logical choice because she wrote Pretty for a Fat Girl, where she writes candidly about body image, shame, and self-acceptance, and she also references your work. Which has clearly been inspiration to her. She's also the host of VPRO online series Big Fat Lies, where she challenges stereotypes and tells honest stories about life in larger bodies. And for this program, she wrote a very powerful text inspired by your work, titled The Messiness of My Post-Shrinking Era. And I'm so glad she's here for her perspective. Give her a warm welcome.
Hi, everyone. Oh, let's move this a little bit. Yeah. I'm quite nervous standing here in front of you guys, of course, but especially in front of Roxane Gay, which work meant so much for me as a human being, but also as a writer. And hunger was a great inspiration during writing my debut book. So, I wrote a text on topics we're discussing tonight. I'm not a native English speaker or writer, so bear with me. But here we go. It was the winter of 2019, late at night, somewhere on a misty, cold balcony in Amsterdam. I was talking to a friend of a friend. She had read my first book, which came out earlier that year. Knap voor een dik meisje, or in English, Pretty for a Fat Girl. It's about living in a larger body in this Western modern culture that perceives fatness as the ultimate failure. A culture that insists we must not at any cost be fat. One that demands us, especially women, to make ourselves smaller, to take up less space, to simply be less. That book was my coming out as a writer, but also as a fat person trying to break free from the endless guilt and fear of simply existing in this body. So, what are you working on now? She asked, blowing out cigarette smoke. Before I could answer, she went on. Because surely you're done writing and talking about being fat all the time, right? About whether you or I, or for that matter, anyone else fits into that beauty ideal. It's so boring. Don't you get tired of it yourself? There are way more important things to write about, aren't there? Her comment caught me off guard, as a writer and as a human being. It's not great fun to be seen as boring or outdated. At that time, I had felt deep urgency to write about these topics and to claim space for myself and for others who always have been pushed to the margins. Always been seen as lazy, undisciplined, stupid, dumb, unattractive, or simply less than. And yet, I was tired of it. After writing Pretty for a Fat Girl, I wanted to prove to myself and to others that I was more than a young woman who didn't fit the standard, who suffered because of it, and therefore could only write about her body, about weight discrimination, and things like that. So I did my best and tried to let go, define myself differently. Wholeheartedly, I started reading, listening, watching everything I could find on radical self-acceptance and self-love. And it worked to a point. My gaze softened when I looked into the mirror. At times I felt freer, more at ease. My body image grew more neutral. I wore less concealing clothes, got myself out there. I started taking better care of myself, got a healthier relationship with exercise and food, healed from an eating disorder. I became more visible in my work. I got on stage, explored new topics. I moved forward, I thought. But something always kept bothering me. A nagging feeling I just couldn't shake off. I had tried so hard to leave that self-hatred, that shame behind, but the world, the system we're all stuck in, was not really moving forward as fast as I hoped, or maybe thought. Competing with other people's opinions and judgments on a daily basis remains exhausting and suffocating. Simply being visible is enough to invite comments. Go exercise, lose weight, you're unhealthy, you're hideous, you should be banned, you're just a lazy fuck, go fix yourself. I still receive messages from coaches and PR agencies offering paid weight loss programs, if only I'd promote them on Instagram. On the streets, I'm still verbally harassed from time to time by men in cars, drunk teenagers, even parents cycling with their children commenting on my weight. Last year, when I went to see my doctor feeling burned out, one of his suggestions was gastric bypass surgery or weight loss medication, as if that would fix everything, as if thinner automatically meant happier and well-rested. Most days, it's still a struggle to resist those who lay claim on my body, who try to take ownership of it. That's the reality for me as a fat woman, but also for a lot other marginalized groups, people of color, queer people, trans people, especially disabled people, and so go on. At the same time, it's no longer just about minority groups. We're all caught in the same system that has turned beauty into something all-consuming. I recently read philosopher Heather Widow's fascinating book, Perfect Me. I don't really like the title, but it's a great read, which explores how beauty has become a central ethical value in our world. The way you look can control your chances of getting a job, a higher salary, a mortgage, and therefore a decent home. It also shapes how visible you are on dating apps, and thus how your chances of finding a fun date or even a life partner. Pretty privilege is real, and so are the consequences of not fitting society's dominant beauty standards. Conforming to them lowers your risk of exclusion and discrimination, and with that, your risk of developing both mental and physical health problems. But even if you do, or more closely match that ideal, the stress of no longer meeting it or the feeling that you're still not good enough can leave you unhappy, restless, and insecure. Like I said, we're all stuck in the same system that often feels like a corset. Too tight, but also creates an illusion of some sort of stability or control. Not entirely unimportant or boring stuff, I would now say to that friend of a friend on that drafty balcony 6 years ago. That dominant ideal, toned, young, thin, smooth skin, shiny hair, a perfectly ableist functioned body, women with ideally curves in the right places, men muscular, has remained pretty much the same for decades now. In Fearing the Black Body, the racial origins of fat phobia, sociologist Sabrina Strings argues that body standards are deeply rooted in patriarchal, racist hierarchies. She demonstrates that in the 18th and 19th centuries, European white women were associated with rationality, moderation, and moral control by Enlightenment thinkers such as Kant and Lavater, and that included having a slim body. In contrast, black women were often portrayed as fat, sensual, and more minimalistic. These days, entire industries thrive on our insecurities. Beauty, diet, fitness, wellness, pharma, all billion-dollar empires built on convincing us that we're not good enough. So we spend, we shrink, we smooth, we starve. And all that time, money and energy poured into chasing a standard designed to keep us chasing for better, more, and different. It's a trap, because the more we invest in fixing ourselves, the less we have left to live, to care for ourselves and each other, to do stuff that makes us happy, gives us a sense of purpose. Time to fight the systems that keep us small in the first place. To fight other forms of oppression, fight against genocides, fascist leaders all around the world that ignore the existence of climate change or basic human rights such as abortion. I do long for a world where appearances matter less, but we don't live in that world yet. Trends like skinny talk, the rise of Ozempic, and the normalization of plastic surgery, the threadwife movement, are dragging us back to stricter standards, as well as stricter beauty standards. Beauty still dictates access to jobs, housing, love, safety, belonging, power, of course. And that's why it frustrates me when people act as if beauty has no power, as if caring about it makes you shallow. How can we not care about something that shapes our life so profoundly? Still, I'm tired of how the burden always falls on us individuals. Not only to meet beauty standards, but also to excel at loving ourselves and still living in this unfair, unequal, draining system. We're told to overcome insecurity as if it were a personal flaw, instead of a symptom of the world we live in. Maybe the real task isn't to be endlessly confident or to completely let go of the way you look, but to make peace with the fact that we sometimes aren't happy, confident, thriving, and how logical that is, still living in the system. So here I am, in this messy post-shrinking era, trying to accept that appearance, my appearance, will always play a role. Not the most important one, but a real one. So some days I celebrate my body. Some days I just want to disappear under the covers in my bed because the stares and judgments feel too heavy. Sometimes I envy my conventionally attractive friends. Sometimes I forget what anyone looks like and just want to laugh and cry and fight the system together. Some days I feel energetic, sexy even, ready to take over the world. Other days I feel old, saggy, afraid my boyfriend will find someone prettier. And sometimes I just think, who cares? Let's have some cake and get over with it. You know, I was born hungry. I can't remember a moment in time where I wasn't eagerly hoping, wanting, longing for more. I try not to see my insatiable hunger as a flaw anymore, but as something that makes me feel alive, that makes me want to move, that makes me want to devour the world.
Tatjana, thank you for your hunger and sharing it with us. I want to start with you, Roxane. What is something that maybe a sentence that stuck by you or something that you really could relate to in her text?
Oh, all of it. You know, this world is very cruel to fat people. It is very cruel. And it's also interesting to see how many different kinds of bodies fall under the category fat. Because I would never look at you and be like, think fat first, ever. And yet, so many people, primarily women, how we live in bodies that are intensely policed. And Amsterdam is hella fat-phobic in every possible way. Everyone here is great. But yes, the people stare, and I'm just like, thank God I don't understand Dutch, so that I can just keep walking down the street. You can see it, and you see it in most countries. The United States is like not better, but I could really relate to that sense of hypervisibility, and then also the medical establishment always trying to treat what they see as the problem, even when that's not the problem. I've gone to the doctor for a sore throat, and the first thing he's written on my chart is obese. And it's like, that's not my name. I just need some penicillin. What's up? So it's challenging, but that was a beautiful essay, and you articulate so well the tension of living in your body and trying to make peace with it in a world that resents the fact that you're able to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, what to add? Like, I knew a question like this would be coming, and I thought, do I nerdishly try and make notes while you're reading? Because so many bits, I was like, oh, I want to write that down. So trying to remember, I think overall, and it's so interesting, Roxane, that you say that, you know, how large the judgment umbrella for fat is, because I am also considered fat, and yet we are not, like, we have such three very different body types, and in Western Europe, all disobedient bodies, in the sense that they're not slim, skinny, straight enough in the ways that are asked for. I thought about what you were saying about essentially like systems and capitalism. One of the things that I think often about is how it doesn't matter what minoritized group you are if someone can figure out how to make money off you. So like, oh no, your fat is good if you can sell a range of something.
Change it. Yeah.
Right, and so you can't just sort of exist. You have to either be validating yourself through something you're promoting or making money through. And the idea that actually very early on in the essay, when your friend, who I'm so curious whether you're still friends, asks you why, do you still want to write about this? And that tension of writing something that is underwritten, right? Not written enough about, not talked enough about, not normalized enough, and also not wanting to be seen as the person who only writes about being fat, right? Because like white men can write about whatever their heart fancies.
I mean, Knausgaard has written how many books of metafiction? Like, bruh, we get it. You have thoughts.
There's a guy, and I can't remember his name, but there's a white guy in the States, an American writer, who was paid by the New Yorker to drink martinis and then write about it. I was like, how does this become my life? I'll go around drinking Negronis and then rate them for in 17,000 words, right? Yeah. But instead, we have to sort of prove our thoughtfulness and vulnerability and intelligence and our self-awareness about how we fit into a society by writing about the thing that no one else can write about, that identity that we have, that we can stake a claim to. And I loved how you were navigating that. And I just found it so incredibly vulnerable and so powerful. And I don't think, like the glass wife, there is something about sharing your vulnerability that helps us to see you more deeply. And also, I'm just fucked off for you that you have to do that for us to see you more deeply.
Roxane, you
that friend, please tell me.
She was a friend of a friend, so I'm not.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Luckily, not.
I almost picked up my mic while you were reading, but I was like, no, let me let her cook. But
No,
there was so much. I could have related to almost every line. The thing about I have a personal trainer. Her name is Sarah. She's amazing. Trainers I've never met, who I would never in life work with, email me, doctors. I think I can help you. You do? You don't even know me. And Sonia Renee Taylor wrote an amazing book I highly recommend for everyone called The Body is Not a Problem. Yeah. The Body is Not an Apology. And I think about that book almost every single day because fat people oftentimes spend so much of our time, energy, and presence apologizing for existing. Let me make myself smaller so you can walk by me on the sidewalk. Let me not bring any attention to myself. Let me put the joke out there before you make it. Let me say I've only eaten carrots today, so you think I'm a good fatty and not a bad one. And so it is interesting to see how we navigate these things, but also that you don't want to be trapped on the fat beat. And that to show that you have range. And I notice this a lot in anyone who's marginalized in some way. We tend to be treated as if the only thing we can be expert upon is ourselves, when nothing could be further from the truth. We can be expert on anything we want to be expert on, including ourselves. And so I thought it was very interesting that after you wrote your first book that you were trying to write against that in some ways. And because I find myself, I do something different from every book one book to the next. You don't know what I'm doing next because I don't want to be pigeonholed as a Black woman writer, even though I'm very happy to be a Black woman writer and I don't want to be any other kind of writer. But when people think you can only do one kind of thing, the bigotry of low expectations is a condemnation.
I see you now. Do you want to respond?
Yeah, I think they really got me and got the text, so that's always nice to experience. And I think it was kind of healing for me writing this text, because Pretty for a Fat Girl was released already 6 years ago, so it's quite a time. I wrote a second book on totally different topics. I wrote a lot of essays, interviews, all different kind of things. And you know, I'm still a fat person. I still experience all these different kind of microaggressions on a daily basis, and still, at some point, I don't want to acknowledge that. I just want to, like you, yeah. Sorry, my English is so when I'm.
Okay,
you're doing a great job.
Yeah, I'm so nervous still, but. I'm still really torn apart, like acknowledging that this is part of my identity and that I also want to take up that space and to talk about these things and to, you know, tell the world that it's not okay that how fat people, but like all people of minorities are being treated still. Yeah. Even though also there is progression also here in the Netherlands. I see a lot of difference since also the time that I wrote that book, also in like there are also doctors or researchers that are talking about weight discrimination and that are saying how harmful it is, and it only makes people sicker, you know, even mentally and physically. And still, it's still such a big problem in this society, and it's still something that I also have to experience on a daily basis. And I don't want it to be the most important thing about me, and I don't think it is, but still it's something I have to deal with. And I also find it actually, writing for me helps to process it and to just take up that space. It's so important for me to get a voice or so. So, yeah. And that's, yeah, like I already said in the beginning, Roxane's work's also so important for me in that. And that's also, I was already writing Pretty for a Fat Girl, and then I read Hunger during the process, and I just felt more recognition and courage to just also take up that space and to just, yeah, be there, be out, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm really glad. The movie's coming out in April.
Ooh.
Oh, great.
So I hope it makes its way over the ocean.
Yeah, just one thing quickly, because there was something that I was struck by as I was listening to you speak, where maybe the audience might think, and you know, I'm sure there's a broad range of experience and knowledge in the room, that, oh, what we're talking about is just about sort of like being nice, right? Like, you know, treat people like people, which is true, but then also to recognize that, like, you know, so you would think that oh, it's just about soft skills and as some people say very disparagingly, like woke ideas, but that actually, you know, the science suggests that it's bad or whatever. I just wanted to interject to say there is, the science around this stuff is contested, right? Like the whole idea about what our bodies, what size is ideal, the whole BMI scale is not meant to work for most people's bodies. You can be, you know, heavy and have high bone density, and that shows up on the scales. And, you know, so all I'm trying to say is, right, the science itself, if you're someone who's like, I'm very rational, I'm very logical, like this is all like, you know, emotional stuff, the science itself is contested. Your doctor does not need to weigh you when you go into to have like a general checkup at your GP. Your weight is inconsequential. And there is lots of interesting science writing that explores why weight came to play such a large part. And turns out it's about a beef between two researchers and not actually, and something that has come to be so normalized, and we think, you know, oh, it's about health, right? The idea that fat people, particularly fat women and pregnant women, have to subject themselves to other people's unsolicited opinions and ideas is about patriarchy and patriarchy as it shows up also in medical research and science.
Yeah.
Yeah, the health thing is in particular one that is often used as a cudgel to get fat people in line. And the assumption is that if you are fat, you are unhealthy. If you are fat, you have diabetes. If you are fat, like over and over, and your own doctors believe this. Like they'll look at your blood work. I've had a doctor rerun my blood work 4 times because he did not believe the numbers that he saw. And I'm like, you can run it all you want, but I'm paying for one. And I know what my body is and what it isn't.
Yeah.
And we are living in a very complicated time now because people have tried to pathologize fatness as this not only moral failing, but this physical failing, like, oh, you're dying, you're blah, blah, blah. I'm like, you're smoking a cigarette, bro. Like, you need to pick a lane here. You don't get to talk to me about health while drinking alcohol or smoking a cigarette or doing whatever freaky deaky thing you do that is a problem. And in the age of Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, Zepbound, blah, 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 the pressure is now, why aren't you taking these drugs? As if fen-phen didn't kill a bunch of women 25, 30 years ago. And that you have to justify now, like, why you're not disciplining your body in this now culturally sanctioned way. But when you do take the drug, why are you cheating? And why are you taking a shortcut? Yeah. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you do. It's not really about health. It's not really about we care about you. It's not about the healthcare system. It's about we want you to discipline your body because we choose to discipline ours. It's because we want to control you. It's because we want to dictate how you live. And it's incredibly frustrating, and it's all meant to minimize people and to take away people's choices, or not even choices, just realities, because it's just complicated, which is one of the key things I was trying to write about in Hunger, that you don't know what people's stories are. You don't know what relationship they have with their body. And when you roll your eyes or you make your dumb little comments or your jokes or you're like, oh, why aren't you on Ozempic? Like, bitch, are you on Ozempic? You go ahead and take it. It's $1,000 a month, but sure, go ahead. It's all very unproductive, and it reduces people to their bodies, which is just not particularly useful. And like you said, it's the least interesting thing about me, and it is not particularly relevant. So let's maybe move on.
Something I want to talk about as well is the self-acceptance, because I saw one of your interviews like a while back, and the interview was like, so you've written the book, so you've completely accepted yourself, right? Mm-hmm. And that sort of made me laugh, and it made you laugh in the interview as well. Because, I mean, it's not really about self-acceptance, is it?
Well, it's really easy to, that's also what I wrote in the text, and that's also the process that I've been through the last couple of years. Like, focus on self-love or self-acceptance is, again, a responsibility for every individual human being. So like you said, like everyone should be disciplined, or everyone should, accept themselves, and then we're done. Then the job is done. Then we're all happy and happily ever after living our great lives. And that's just not realistic. That's also the discussion or the talk, not really discussion, but the talk that you guys had before, that's about that process are never linear, and it's just messy, and that's part of being alive, being a human being. And also in these sort of processes, I think about, self-acceptance is great. And I really love that on some days I feel more at ease with myself and feel more free in my body. I'm not really focusing on my appearance or even find myself pretty or whatever. And that's nice. And also self-acceptance for my mental state or whatever, because it's not only about the way you look, it's also accepting yourself as the total flawed human being that you are. But it's super messy, and it's all over the place, and there's not a finish line or so. And I think that's also something that we have to accept.
Yeah. Well, and there's a lot of rhetoric around self-acceptance, which I encourage everyone to accept themselves, embrace themselves, live your truth, be happy with who you are. But like a lot of us are just like, you know what, I'm miserable. I hate myself. Like, come on, just let me live. Mind your own business. Like, there's so much pressure on people to accept themselves. And it's like, yeah, okay, sure. But I have laundry to do. And at times, the contrarian in me really bristles about self-acceptance because I think it's incredibly healthy. And I do think self-loathing is unproductive and self-harm is even worse. But like, sometimes I just don't have time. Like, and people are always like, love yourself or no one else will ever love you. And I'm like, no, my wife loves me just fine. We're good. And I really try to now distance myself from all of the language around affirmation and self-acceptance. I think it's a great journey. I hope anyone who wants to be on that journey is on that journey. But I don't even find it interesting anymore or productive. Do I accept myself? Who fucking cares? I don't. Like, I do accept myself. But it's not interesting. It's not useful for me. And I know that I'm probably an anomaly in that instance because I know so many people are so deeply invested. But the way that fat acceptance has been tied to self-acceptance is actually more about the people who ask about self-acceptance. And not you, truly out of the beyond the context of this conversation. What they're saying is, I could never accept myself if I were you. Yeah. So how do you accept yourself? That's the real question they're asking. They don't really care if you're at peace with yourself. They want you to explain how you don't jump off a building every day because you, like, really, when you are fat and people react to you, you're kind of like their own walking nightmare. And you can see it sometimes, the way people will look at you, like when you're boarding a plane and it's like, I'm in first class, we're not together. Don't worry. You keep it moving, I'm in my own little cubicle here. But the terror, like, they're clear that people are like, the thing I am most afraid of is fatness. And it's partly because of whatever ideas they harbor, but because also they know how they treat fat people. And so let's really be honest about what self-acceptance is in this kind of a conversation. And it's not really about how do you love yourself, take care of yourself, et cetera. It's like, how do you stay alive? Because I wouldn't if I were you.
I think it's also like when we were talking before about being okay with being uncomfortable. Like, you know, when you are, in the presence of people who have divergent bodies or lived experiences, it is uncomfortable. And so then people ask you if you've accepted yourself because it feels like a nice, happy ending, right? So then they don't have to think about it anymore. You're fine, so cool, let's move on. I think there's a bit of that in it. I don't know that I would like to replace self-acceptance with self-awareness. I think self-awareness is like super fucking critical. Sorry, I have a potty mouth. Self-awareness is so important, right? Like there is no, the only way out is in, right? And again, the people who you named before, these like Enlightenment white guys, have done us all a disservice because they have said it's all happening here and we're really disconnected from our bodies. And the self-awareness that we need to kind of like understand what's happening here and how we relate to each other, all of that makes us better people and, better societies. But yeah, self-acceptance, like I'm always really fucked off when I look on Instagram and the person who's preaching self-acceptance is like the smallest size, right? Like it's self-acceptance plus magical yoni, and they're like size whatever, 0, no stretch marks in sight, and they are naked on a rock somewhere and are saying like,
when I see that woman, I'm like, I sure hope you accept yourself. Because I accept you.
Every ad, babe, is targeted at you. Like every societal convention is talking about you. Like you are not being really brave to like sit in this circle with your girlfriends and all naked and going, we've accepted ourselves. Like, the risk level was 0, right?
I need to go to the last question. I'm sorry.
Solved.
Time.
I got animation.
And after that, I have a question that I have to ask. It's completely unrelated, but also vaguely related.
Yes, we will come and see your film.
Just to anyone here who lives in Amsterdam.
Okay. Okay. Cliffhanger right there. Just one question. What I loved about your text at the end, you reclaim your hunger. You're like, I want to thrive. I'm not surviving, I'm thriving. It's maybe like there's so many people here. I want to end the talk by saying what tools can we give people? What message can we give people to stimulate that hunger? Super easy question, yeah, of course.
Guru Tatjana.
No. I think it starts, unfortunately, by doing the stuff that you actually hate and are mortified for. That's also what I did when I started writing, go to, and it's not only in writing or getting on stage, but also in day-to-day life. Just, I think it's actually what you said, like being really uncomfortable and being comfortable with that, just finding more ease in that and just show up for yourself, be self-aware, be responsible for your own life, for your own actions, and just, embrace being hungry for more. Yeah.
Roxane, do you want to add anything?
I don't think we need to add anything.
Okay. Well, before we go to the audience, you have a question for us?
This is a random question, but having walked around for 2 days now, where are the women? Like, has anyone noticed that there's lots and lots of clumps of young men that just don't seem to be working, and which is not a problem, but just hang out all day all over the city?
Oh.
It's weird.
Maybe because it's ADE, the Amsterdam dance event. I mean, I'm really categorizing these men right now. I'm sorry, but
there's nothing wrong. It's normal men. Like, there's nothing wrong with them.
Okay.
It's just like little clumps of young men everywhere.
I think it's a DJs when you were at your hotel.
Do you guys are you all gay? What is happening?
Well, when we were at your hotel yesterday, there were a lot of men as well.
Yes.
So I asked the staff, I was like, "What's going on? Why are there so many men here?" And they're like, "It's all DJs." So I think that's the answer.
Yeah, okay, because it's like shocking. The only other place where I've seen this many men together was Kazakhstan, and even Uzbekistan. And I was like, I get this, like, separation of genders, but here, what is going on? There are so many DJs staying in my hotel, though. There are so many DJs.
Okay, we have time for a few audience questions. Does anyone have a question?
Let's go.
Is there a man maybe with the first question? No?
That's funny.
No. Okay, just go. I see a hand here.
Nora.
We hold the mic. It's part of the service. Don't worry.
Hi, everyone. Just thank you so much, Roxane, for coming. And Eliza, I'm so happy to hear you speak as well. I'll definitely follow your work. And Tatjana as well. I kind of wanted to take the question a little bit more to Europe, because in the beginning, right, there was so much US focus, but all these theories right now that are happening in the US, this shit, sorry for my potty mouth as well, is from Europe, right? This whole shebang. Yeah, so I wanted to a little bit pick your brain. And on that note, in the Netherlands, for example, 70% of women work part-time. And it's a very interesting conversation here, because once you get a baby, I have troubles talking with my friends about it, because they're like, but I need to take care of my baby, so majority go in that way. So I just wanted to pick your brain on that topic, if you have any thoughts.
That's interesting, because oftentimes in Europe, there's a little bit more equitable gender roles when it comes to caretaking for children. What is going on with the Nederlanders? That's an interesting and that's a shocking statistic, because, wow. And that's exactly what the patriarchy wants. It wants women to feel like their participation in the professional sphere is voluntary and it is dilettantish. You don't have to do it full time, because the men are doing that work. And they're actually trying to make this happen now in the US. They're pushing women out of the workplace at alarming rates, and the percentage of the dollar that women make is getting lower instead of higher. It's going in the absolute wrong direction. And so I think that women have to decide, though, like, yes, that statistic is alarming. Is it a voluntary choice? Or are women doing it because there are no social systems to allow them to work full time? Whereas in other countries, I'm thinking of Iceland, where the last time I was in Iceland, everyone I talked to was like, yeah, I've got 5 kids. And so at the end, I was like, why are you wise having so many children? Other than the fact that it's an amazing country. And they were like, well, because childcare is free. And I was like, oh, that'll do it. I think I'll come and have 7 then, sure. And so I think until there's enough infrastructure, women aren't able to make that choice, because what always happens, whether it's here or elsewhere, is that people say, well, the man is going to make more. My job isn't going to cover the childcare, which is like, why is your job covering the childcare and not his? And so my only thought is that is a shocking statistic. And for the women who do want to work full time, man, like what can be done to address that? Because I love kids and they're amazing. And my mom stayed home to raise me, and I 1000% credit that with why I'm here today, because she was there every day and was such a great parent. But not everyone. I couldn't stay home all day with a child. I can't even stay home all day with my dog. I'm like, you need to go on a walk. You need to go hang out with your friend. I can't look at you for 24 hours a day. I can do it for 12. I can do it for 16, but not for 24. And so, oh my goodness, I learned something new. Oh man, I thought you guys were so progressive.
Is there another question? The girl with the hat above?
Okay. Hi. Thank you, Roxane and Tatjana and Eliza, for your contributions here tonight. It's been such an amazing discussion. I just wanted to say, as 3 of you were talking first, before my question, when you were talking about, oh, we're all in such different fat bodies. I'm from the Philippines, and I'm considered like obese where I come from, and it's just, we are in such a trap of being judged for our bodies no matter what we do, and we'll never seem to break out of it. So I related so much with your text and the frustration that you felt. Thank you for sharing that. My question was to Roxane, and maybe anyone who wants to comment. Since we're talking about women and taking up space, I wanted to hear your thoughts on your relationship with your body in another dimension, which is getting older and aging and being erased from the public sphere. I'm curious, I just want to hear your wisdom about this.
That's a great question. My mom had told me for the last 15, 20 years of her life that the older you get as a woman, the more invisible you are. And she said, la vieillesse est un naufrage. She's from Haiti. And I always thought, oh, it can't be that bad. But I just turned 51, and I'm happy to be 51. Let me be crystal clear. Would not go back to any decade other than my 40s, which were great. But it is interesting to see that the older you get, the less relevant people think you are, the less they think you have to add. I think I have a good 9 years left before I really start to disappear. But my wife is 64, and she is really struggling, and she's hot. And so I'm like, if you feel invisible, I don't know what I'm gonna do. But it is hard because you think you're part of the world, but I also know many women think it's a relief. Like, okay, now I'm not going to be bothered anymore. Now I actually can walk down the street and do whatever I want. So it is an issue, and it's something I think about a lot. But man, people have so many other issues with me that the invisibility of age, like, yeah, you know what? Sure. If I had to pick, I'll take that oppression.
But it also seems, I mean, you have this amazing stature in society, and your influence has grown with your age. So yes. So do you feel more invisible or more visible, or both at the same time?
I feel more visible. I don't feel invisible, but I think that's by virtue of my career. And I also know that for writers, we really hit our stride between 40 and 65. It's unlike many other professions. We tend, like mathematicians do their best work, I think, between 20 and 32. But writers, we do our best work when we're older. You can, of course, be an ingenue and write something brilliant in your teens, 20s, etc. But you gotta like simmer like a little wine, just like, ooh, let's take out the 1974, let's go. I don't feel invisible, and I want to. I don't want to be perceived. Leave me alone. But I do feel visible, and I do feel like I have a great ability to share my thoughts and ideas in the world, and I recognize the privilege of that because I do see how many writers, even within just the context of writers, struggle to be seen, even when they're well published and have access to platforms. And in this very complex and crowded information economy, it is hard to feel visible, but I do feel visible. And then I also feel visible. I think fatness overrides a lot. I'm 6'3", which is 1 meter something.
90?
Yeah, it's a lot of meters. And so I have tattoos. I'm always going to stand out. People just notice me. And I've become very self-conscious over the years. And my wife is always like, they're staring at you because you're tall and we're in Japan. Like, relax. And so what I try to do now is try and parse out, is this bad visibility? Is it judgmental visibility, or is it just visibility? And how can I make sense of it and then make peace with it?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think that we're out of time. I'm sorry. We're going to introduce Roxane to the Dutch gezellig borrel, which means that...
Oh, we are?
We are.
You're talking about, oh.
It's the third act.
Okay.
And that means that we're going to go to the bar and talk a bit more. Roxane, I was so honored you're here. Eliza, Tatjana, thank you for sharing the stage with me. Thank you to the audience and to our technicians. Have a great night.